The alien scholars moved through the dark halls of the great archive ship as it drifted silently above the blue planet below. The machines hummed quietly, pulling ancient signals and forgotten code from deep layers of Earth's digital ruins. And with every passing hour, more fragments of human history appeared on the glowing screens. Records of battles, records of fire, records of endless wars stretching across centuries and continents. At first, the aliens laughed, their voices sharp and mocking. They pointed at the images of men with swords and shields. They mocked the cries of warriors who fought with iron and fire. They whispered that humans were creatures trapped in old legends, lost in violence that no real species could survive. For how could such destruction last for so long without burning the whole world to ash? How could any people endure so much chaos and not vanish into silence? The scholars believed it must be wrong. They said the records were twisted myths, maybe stories told by humans to frighten one another, maybe illusions of a primitive mind trying to explain survival through fear. They shook their heads and dismissed the bloody chronicles as tales without weight. But in the corners of the archive hall, some of the alien soldiers stood watching quietly, their eyes hard and unblinking. And though they said nothing aloud, a chill moved across their scaled faces. For they sensed something deeper behind the images, something that could not be laughed away. The soldiers had fought before on 100 worlds. They had seen many enemies and crushed them with ease. They had faced beasts with claws, armies with lasers, tribes with strange tricks of survival. Yet none of those enemies filled them with unease. None of them made their spines stiffen. But these humans, even as faded shadows in old records, carried a weight that pressed into their thoughts like stone. There was something raw and heavy about their history, as if the violence was not an accident, but a pattern carved into the bones of the species. The scientists ignored this feeling and gathered more fragments. They sent the images and stories across the fleets, and soon every ship buzzed with talk of Earth's past. The laughter spread wider. Soldiers joked about humans fighting with sticks and fire. Leaders claimed no species with such a past could ever rise into the stars. They said humans must have invented half of it. They said it was nothing more than myth. Yet at the edges of every conversation, some voices grew quieter, and in those voices lived the same cold doubt, the fear that the records were not false at all. On the third night of study, the archive machines uncovered something different. It was not just drawings or simple scripts, but full moving images, shaky yet sharp enough to cut through the doubt. They showed endless marches of men in uniforms. They showed fields covered with fire and metal. They showed skies filled with screaming machines that rained destruction across whole cities. They showed shadows of weapons that could tear the earth apart with light. And for the first time, even the laughing scholars fell silent. For these were not myths told by mouths. These were records too detailed to be fantasy. A council was called within the great chamber of the fleet. Leaders of science and war gathered. The walls glowed with projected images of human battles, and the voices of thousands whispered through the air. Half claimed it was still false. The other half said no lie could hold so much pain. The argument burned for hours. One side demanded the humans be dismissed as storytellers. The other demanded caution. For if even a part of this was true, then the species below was unlike any other they had known. The soldiers pressed their voices into the council. Their tone was heavy and sharp. They said that when they looked at the humans in the records, they saw not myth, but memory. They saw the same eyes they had seen on countless battlefields, eyes of predators, eyes of survivors. They said no story could fake such expressions. No myth could craft such raw hunger for life. But the scientists argued again that technology would have erased such a species long ago if the violence were real, they said. Humans would have destroyed themselves and left no trace. And yet here, humans stood alive and growing among the stars. The chamber grew tense as silence stretched. And in that silence came the decision. The council could not ignore the fear that had crept into the hearts of their own warriors. They voted to send a mission. They would not trust record alone. They would not trust laughter or doubt. They would see the truth with their own eyes. They would confront the humans and test if the tales of endless wars and burning skies were real or only legend carved by frightened minds. As the vote was sealed, a weight seemed to settle across the fleet. The laughter died, and in its place came a quiet unease, for deep inside they all knew that no matter what they found, whether truth or lie, the answer would change everything, and the shadows of human history had already begun to haunt them. The Fleet Council chamber was still heavy with silence as the decision echoed through the ranks. The order was simple yet dangerous. They would go to the humans and see for themselves. They would confront the species that carried such terrifying records of war. They would measure if the tales of destruction were true or false, and the weight of this task pressed on everyone who heard it. A single ship was chosen for the mission, not the largest, not the smallest, but one balanced with scientists and soldiers alike. The council demanded that both reason and strength must walk together, for none knew what they would find. The ship was named the Shakar. Its silver hull gleamed under the light of the nearby sun, and as its engines roared alive, the crew inside felt a mixture of curiosity and unease. For though they pretended to laugh and joke, the truth lay deep in their eyes. The truth of fear they could not shake. Among them was Commander Varen, a soldier who had seen many wars across the edges of the galaxy. His scales were scarred from battles fought in the dust of strange worlds, and his voice carried the weight of experience. Yet even he did not laugh when he studied the records of Earth. Instead, he watched them with a stillness that unsettled the younger crew. And when asked what he thought, he only said this: "No myth shows eyes like those. Those are eyes of killers who refuse to die." The journey toward Earth was short compared to the endless distances of the stars, but to the crew of the Shakar it felt long. Each moment dragged as if time itself had slowed. Whispers filled the halls. Some claimed the humans would bow and prove weak. Others claimed they would rise with fire. And every whisper carried the same hidden question: what if the humans were worse than the records showed? What if their history was not exaggerated but softened? At last, the blue planet filled their view, spinning with clouds and light, oceans glittering, forests thick with green. It looked peaceful from above. It looked like a world of calm beauty. But the crew remembered the archives. They remembered burning skies and cities torn by war. They wondered how such a gentle planet could hold such darkness, and the contradiction only deepened their unease. Signals were sent to the human stations orbiting the planet, messages wrapped in careful words of peace. The Shakar claimed it came in curiosity, seeking knowledge and exchange. The humans responded quickly. Their voices carried calm tones, welcoming and open. They agreed to meet, and soon coordinates were set for a neutral station between their worlds, the meeting place where truth would be tested. As the crew prepared, tension grew. Armor was polished, weapons checked though hidden from sight. Scientists packed their recorders, translators, and analyzers. Every being aboard knew they must appear calm and controlled. Yet every heartbeat pounded with a single thought: they were about to stand face to face with a species whose past was filled with war so endless it seemed like madness. The doors opened, and the humans stepped into the meeting hall. At first glance, they seemed fragile compared to many galactic species. Soft skin, no scales, no armor built into their bodies, eyes too round, hands too thin, and for a moment the aliens almost relaxed. But then the humans moved. They walked with a rhythm that was steady and sharp. They carried themselves with an ease that spoke of discipline. Their eyes scanned the room not with fear, but with a hunter's calm, and the unease returned stronger than before. The human leader spoke first, his voice clear and steady. He welcomed them. He offered friendship. But even in his friendly tone, there was something beneath, a weight carried in each word, as if he had spoken through storms before and would do so again. The aliens listened and smiled politely, but their soldiers shifted uneasily, for they could sense it too. This was not the voice of a peaceful species. This was the voice of one that had lived through fire and survived. The scientists asked questions, careful and soft. They asked about history, about records, about the endless battles that filled the archives. The humans answered without denial. They nodded and said yes. Those wars were real. They told stories of nations rising and falling, of weapons created to destroy entire cities, of battles fought on land, sea, and sky, and the room grew heavier with every word. For the humans did not flinch as they spoke. They did not try to hide the horror. Instead, they carried it as one carries a scar, a wound healed but never forgotten. One alien scholar whispered that it must be exaggeration, that no species could fight for so long and not collapse. The human turned to him, eyes steady, and said, "Survival demands a price. We paid it again and again, and we endured," and the silence that followed pressed like iron on every chest. Commander Varen studied the humans closely. He watched their eyes, the way they shifted, the way they measured every movement in the room. And he knew these were not weak beings pretending to be strong. These were survivors pretending to be calm. And the more they spoke, the clearer it became. Their history was not a myth. It was truth carved in blood. The meeting ended with smiles and promises of exchange. But when the humans left the hull, the crew of the Shakar sat in silence. The laughter was gone, replaced by a quiet dread, for they had seen enough to know the records were no lie. And in the hearts of the soldiers, a single thought echoed again and again. If humans carried such history, then what would they do if pushed to the edge once more? That night, as the Shakar drifted in orbit, Commander Varen spoke to his officers, his voice low and certain. He said the council must be warned, for the humans were not myths. They were not storytellers. They were predators dressed in peace. And if the galaxy did not tread carefully, then one day the fires of human history would burn again, and this time it would not be a single world but many. The Shakar remained in orbit above Earth as the stars wheeled silently around it. The crew felt the weight of what they had seen during the meeting. The laughter that once filled their halls had been replaced by whispers that carried a sharp edge. They spoke of human eyes that burned with memory. They spoke of voices that carried the echo of storms. And no one could deny that the archives were real anymore. The humans had confirmed it with steady words and unshaken calm. Commander Varen stood before the wide glass of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the blue planet below. He thought of the council, of the decision to test humanity, and he knew the test was already over. The truth was clear as the stars, yet the council wanted proof stronger than words. They would not accept stories or impressions. They would demand something that could not be denied, and Varen feared what that demand would awaken. The message from the council arrived at dawn station time. The voice of the elder rang across the Shakar, cold and commanding. It ordered them to press further. It ordered them to provoke the humans in a controlled way, to see if violence slept beneath their calm. The crew shivered as the words played, for none wished to provoke what they had already glimpsed, but orders were law, and the Shakar prepared for a dangerous path. The plan was shaped by the council itself. They would stage a small strike against human patrols near the neutral station. Nothing fatal, nothing final, but enough to spark a reaction. They wanted to watch, to measure, to see if the humans would show restraint or unleash the fire of their history. The scientists argued it was reckless, yet their voices were drowned by the will of the soldiers, and so the decision was made. The shadows of truth would be tested through flame. The strike came swift and sharp. Alien craft darted through the void like hunting blades. They fired bursts of energy at human escorts, circling near the neutral outpost. Shields flared, alarms screamed, and the humans scrambled to respond. No lives were lost in that instant. But the challenge was clear. The message was written in fire, and silence followed in the black. The crew of the Shakar held their breath, waiting for the human response, waiting to see if the legends of endless war would rise again. At first the humans seemed calm. Their ships held position. They did not fire wildly. They did not panic. Instead, they formed lines with precision, shields overlapping, movements sharp as if rehearsed countless times. It was discipline born of long practice, and the alien crew felt unease deepen. Then the human commander spoke across the void, his voice carried through channels to every ear aboard the Shakar. It was not a shout. It was not rage. It was calm and steady, yet it froze the blood of those who listened. He said these words, "We do not seek war, but if you wish to test us, know this, we will not fall. We will not bow. We have buried countless enemies before, and if you demand it, we will bury more." The silence that followed felt endless. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the hum of the engine seemed quieter. Commander Varen felt his scales tighten as if struck by ice, for the human had not raised his voice. Yet every word carried the weight of endless battles. the promise of violence waiting just beneath the skin. And it was then the crew realized the truth. The humans were not pretending peace. They were restraining themselves from something far worse. The council demanded escalation. The order came to push harder, to strike again, but Varen hesitated. He felt in his bones that this path would end in fire. Yet duty bound him. And once more alien craft cut across the void, their weapons burning through shields, pushing against human lines. This time sparks flew inside the human ships. Systems faltered. Alarms grew louder, and the galaxy held its breath. The humans did not crumble. They did not retreat. They answered with movement so sharp it seemed like instinct. Their ships turned in unison. They fired with precision. Not wild anger, but measured fury. And in the blink of an eye, alien craft were torn apart, shields shattered, hulls cracked, and the Shakaar felt the sting of fire across its own side. The humans had struck back with terrifying speed, and they had done so without losing their calm. The battle ended in minutes. Human ships reformed their lines, their guns still aimed but silent. The human commander spoke again, his voice no louder, no harsher. He said, "The test is finished. We know what you wanted. You wanted to see if the stories were true. Now you have seen them. The past is not dead. It lives within us, and if you force us, it will rise again." On the command deck of the Shakaar, silence ruled. No one dared speak. No one dared move. They had seen the shadow of human history take form before their very eyes, and it was worse than they imagined, for it was not chaos. It was not madness. It was cold, sharp, controlled. It was violence tamed into discipline, and that was far more terrifying than wild fury. Commander Varen sent his report to the council, his words heavy. He said the humans are not legends. They are reality. Their history is truth, and if we push them further, it will not be one ship. It will not be one fleet. It will be every human rising with the same cold fury. The council must tread with care, for the galaxy stands on the edge of fire. Yet even as he sent the message, Varen knew the council would not listen. Their pride was too strong, their hunger for control too deep, and he feared the test was not over. He feared it had only begun. And in the shadows of the command deck, he whispered to himself, "May the stars protect us if the humans are forced to rise." The council chamber echoed with voices as the report from the Shakaar spread across fleets and colonies. The words of Commander Varen struck like blades. Humans had shown discipline. Humans had shown fury wrapped in silence, and no one could laugh anymore. The council elders tried to twist the truth. They said it was exaggeration. They said it was only one encounter, but soldiers and captains whispered to each other in corridors. They had seen the recordings. They had heard the human voice, and deep inside, they felt fear. The Shakaar drifted near Earth orbit, its hull scarred by the clash. The crew worked in silence. Their hands moved across panels, but their eyes carried shadows. No one spoke of victory. No one spoke of duty. They only thought of the humans who had turned defense into a storm in seconds. The crew knew they had provoked a force they did not understand, and the thought of another strike weighed heavy on their hearts. Commander Varen stood alone in the observation chamber, his gaze fixed on the blue world below. He could see clouds curling like smoke, seas shining like mirrors, and land scarred by history. Every mountain, every river, every city was touched by conflict. Humans had carried war across their own world long before they reached the stars, and Varen knew the council was blind if they believed that fire could be erased by time. A new order arrived from the council, its voice colder than ice. They demanded that the humans be pressured again, not with a fleet, not with weapons, but with insult and humiliation. They wanted to break the human spirit through words, through threats, through shows of strength. They thought pride could shatter what weapons could not, and Varen felt his scales tighten in dread. For he knew that pride was the last thing to challenge in a species built on survival through endless trial. The humans received the message as they gathered near the neutral outpost. Their commanders read the words aloud. Insults that cut deep, accusations that humans were liars, claims that their history was false, that they were weak, that their power was smoke and mirrors. The aliens thought the humans would lash out blindly. They thought anger would cloud reason. But instead the humans grew still, silent as the edge of night. Their commanders only replied with one phrase: "You will learn truth." Soon enough, whispers of that answer spread like wildfire across the stars. Fleets listened, colonies repeated it, and every ear that heard it felt the same chill. Humans had not shouted, they had not defended themselves with long speeches, they had simply promised truth, and that promise carried the weight of storms yet to break. Soldiers of alien fleets began to wonder if their leaders had made a mistake that could not be undone. On Earth, deep within the archives hidden under stone and metal, human leaders met in shadow. Their eyes cold as they studied the council orders, they understood the test, they understood the provocation, and they spoke of patience. One of them said the aliens think we are beasts. Another said they think our fire is myth. A third said, then let them keep thinking that, for the more they doubt, the stronger the lesson will strike. And silence filled the chamber as the leaders agreed. Meanwhile, the crew of the Shakar began to notice strange things. Human ships no longer followed normal patrol routes. They moved in patterns that seemed random, yet carried hidden design. Scouts vanished into shadows and returned with data unseen. Messages traveled through secret channels, and it felt as if the humans were preparing something vast, something waiting beneath the calm. The crew whispered of storms brewing behind quiet seas, but none dared speak aloud to the commander. Varen himself could feel it, though no report said it clear. He could feel the weight in the air, the way human movements carried purpose. He remembered the human commander's voice, the steady promise that history lived still, and he feared that the council in their pride had given the humans reason to awaken that history. He sent warnings again, his words sharp with urgency, but the council replied with silence or dismissal. They refused to believe fear could come from one species. The days turned long and heavy. Fleets watched humans with wary eyes. Colonies prepared defenses in secret. Rumors spread that human forces were gathering far from the neutral station. Some said it was training. Others said it was only routine. But Varen felt the truth in his bones. He knew they were preparing an answer not with words, but with action, and he prayed it would not fall upon his crew first. Night fell across Earth, and from orbit it looked like a sea of lights blooming across continents. Yet those lights told a story too, for every city built over ruins, every tower raised from ash, every street glowing with fire had been touched by war. Humans had rebuilt from ruin countless times. They had survived where others would fade, and Varen could not understand how the council failed to see that truth shining brighter than any star. Then came the whisper across secure channels, a message not meant for alien ears, yet somehow caught by stray signals. It said only this: when they come, they will see, and nothing more. The crew of the Shakar trembled as they read it, for it was not a plan, not a threat, but a promise, and promises from humans no longer felt like mere words. The council called another session. Proud voices argued that humans must be broken soon before their myth spread too far. But some younger officers spoke with doubt. They said the recordings of the clash showed not myth but skill. They said the human silence was more frightening than anger. Yet the elders dismissed them. Arrogance clouded their sight, and so the path was set. The test would continue until truth was undeniable. Varen returned to his quarters heavy with thought. He stared into the mirror and saw his own eyes tired, his own scales dulled by stress. He whispered to himself that war was coming, not because the humans wanted it, but because the council would force it, and when it came, the galaxy would remember the day they tried to measure human history as if it were a tale to mock. Outside, in the black sea of stars, human ships glided silently, their movements patient, their lights dimmed, as if the night itself had accepted them as its own. They did not rush. They did not shout. They only waited, and in that waiting lay the promise of storms. Storms that could break fleets, storms that could burn across worlds, storms that would show the terrifying reality of human history. The galaxy slept in uneasy silence as fleets whispered of humans preparing in secret. The words spread like fire across stations and colonies. The humans were waiting. The humans were watching. And though no strike had yet come, every commander felt the weight of unseen eyes, as if history itself stared at them through the stars. On the Shakar, the crew felt tension grow heavier each day. Every beep from sensors made their hearts tighten. Every flicker on the radar felt like a shadow moving where no shadow should be. Their commander Varen walked the decks with quiet steps, his face stern, his voice sharper than before. He spoke little, yet his silence carried fear, for the crew could see that even he no longer trusted the calm. Across the council chamber, the elders grew restless, their voices loud and proud. They shouted that humans were weak, that their silence was only fear, that their threats were empty. They demanded another show of strength, a fleet to surround Earth, to push until humans bowed. They believed this would end the whispers and end the doubts. But soldiers who had seen the recordings shifted in their seats. They remembered the human eyes, the steady voices, the unshaken discipline, and deep inside, they prayed the elders would stop. But the order was given, and so fleets began to move, giant ships stretching across the void, their engines burning trails of fire. They closed in around Earth and its stations, forming a ring of steel and light. The galaxy watched through broadcast channels, millions of eyes fixed on the daring of the council, waiting to see if humans would finally break. On Earth, the leaders gathered once more in their hidden chamber, their faces calm, their voices steady. They looked at the images of alien fleets surrounding their home, and instead of fear, they felt resolve. One leader said they think we are prey again. Another said they think silence means surrender. A third said then we will show them silence means something far different. And with those words they sent new orders into the night. Human fleets hidden beyond the edge of vision began to stir. Ships powered by quiet engines slipped through dark corridors of space, their hulls painted black to blend with the void, every movement calculated, every step precise. They did not rush, they did not boast. They simply moved like hunters circling prey that believed itself safe, and no alien radar caught them, for they had learned long ago how to move unseen. Back on the Shakar, the crew started noticing faint gaps in their sensor data, strange flickers that appeared and vanished too quickly to lock on. Technicians checked systems, engineers replaced wires, but nothing explained it, and whispers spread among the soldiers. Some said it was only a glitch, others said it was ghosts in the void, but Varen knew better. He had seen how humans fought, and his heart told him these were no ghosts but shadows with teeth. The council continued their broadcast of threats, their voices arrogant as they demanded human surrender. They told the galaxy that humans would kneel or be erased. They told the fleets that history of violence was myth. They told the colonies that truth belonged only to them. Yet all the while their words carried less power, for the more they shouted, the more the humans remained silent, and silence began to feel heavier than any weapon. Then came the night when stars near the fleet dimmed for seconds, sensors blinked, screens flickered, and when they cleared again, ships were missing. Not human ships, but alien ones. Entire patrols gone without a trace. Commanders shouted for answers. Technicians scrambled across consoles, but no sign appeared. It was as if the void itself had swallowed them whole, and fear spread faster than any order could contain. Varen stood before the viewing glass, his chest heavy as he whispered to himself, "They are here." He remembered the human words, "You will learn truth soon enough." And now he knew those words were unfolding, for the humans had not attacked in rage. They had not charged blindly. They had chosen the shadows, chosen patience, chosen the old ways of hunters, and now they were striking in silence, one piece at a time. The crew of the Shakar could feel the fear growing across the fleet. Voices on comm channels cracked with doubt. Ships began pulling closer together like prey huddling in the dark, and every time a sensor blinked, they imagined another vessel vanishing. Some whispered that the humans were using weapons unseen. Others said they were pulling ships into another dimension. But Varen told his crew the truth. Humans are not ghosts. Humans are hunters, and hunters take you when you do not look. On Earth, the leaders watched the reports with cold eyes. Every missing ship was a message. Every silence from the council was proof that fear was spreading. One leader said they thought our history was a tale. Now they're living it. Another said they thought violence was myth. Now they are breathing it. A third said, and this is only the beginning, and once again silence filled the chamber as all agreed. The alien council called an emergency session. Their pride cracked but not yet broken. They argued loudly. Some demanded retreat. Others demanded attack. Their voices thundered through the chamber. Yet none could deny the truth that something beyond their control was happening. The humans had chosen the battlefield, and the battlefield was fear itself, invisible and merciless, and no elder's speech could erase it. As hours passed, more ships vanished, sometimes one at a time, sometimes entire squads, always without warning, always without sound, and each loss carved deeper cracks into the fleet's courage. Soldiers no longer mocked humans. They no longer laughed at history. Instead, they whispered prayers to gods long forgotten, hoping they would not be next. Veyron walked through his ship, his crew silent as they worked. Every console glow felt like the last candle in darkness. He wanted to tell them hope remained, but he could not lie, for he too felt the shadow moving around them, closer with each breath. He raised his voice at last, saying only this: "We were fools to test them, fools to doubt them, fools to forget that hunters rule the dark." And outside, in the endless night, the human ships moved with grace, their engines like whispers, their weapons like unseen fangs. They closed the circle slowly, patiently, until the aliens inside no longer felt like a fleet of conquerors, but like prey trapped within a cage woven of silence. And the galaxy watching knew something terrifying was about to unfold. For the humans were not finished. They were only beginning, and the silence was only the breath before the storm. The alien fleets held their formation in trembling silence, as if the entire galaxy had grown, still waiting for what would come next. For the humans had been shadows until now, silent and unseen, but the weight of that silence pressed heavier than any fleet of warships, and everyone knew it could not last forever. On the Shakar, the crew worked without speaking, their eyes wide, and their hands shaking. Every console flash made their hearts leap. Every sensor blink felt like a threat. Commander Veyron stood at the center, watching the void outside with cold eyes, for he knew the storm was near. He had seen hunters wait before striking, and he could feel the same patience here. The alien council continued to argue, their chamber filled with voices of anger, fear, and arrogance. Some demanded retreat, others shouted for total war. Their words clashed like thunder, but in their hearts, even the proudest among them felt the shadow of dread, for they knew ships were vanishing without a sound, and they could not stop it. Then the silence shattered. The first human strike came swift and merciless in the outer rim of the blockade. One of the largest alien carriers lit up in sudden fire, its shields collapsing under a coordinated barrage. No warning, no message, only the soundless burst of destruction filling the void. The entire crew of nearby ships froze as the flames spread across their comm screens. Before anyone could respond, another strike followed. Then another. Human ships, once unseen, revealed themselves for seconds, only to strike and vanish again like ghosts that bled fire. They moved with perfect precision, weaving between the alien vessels, cutting their formation apart, before vanishing into the dark once more. The galaxy watched in awe through countless broadcasts. Whole colonies held their breath as they saw the feared fleets of the Council breaking apart under attacks. They could not predict. Commentators whispered in disbelief. The humans were not charging blindly. They were orchestrating every strike like an art of war, and the fear spread faster than light. On the Shakar, alarms blared as their fleet struggled to respond. Ships fired blindly into the void, hoping to catch the shadows. But their blasts hit nothing. Sensors screamed of threats that vanished before locks could form. Commanders shouted orders that were drowned in chaos. Veyron barked at his crew to stay focused, to track patterns, not ghosts. But even he knew they were only surviving, not fighting back. Earth itself remained silent as its leaders watched the storm unfold, their faces calm, yet their eyes sharp. They listened to the reports of alien ships burning, of fleets collapsing, of chaos spreading. One leader whispered, "This is what they wanted." They asked to see if history was true. Another answered, "Now they will know the truth." Another said, "And we have only begun." Human ships began to press closer, their movements growing bolder, strikes hitting deeper into the blockade. Entire alien destroyers ripped apart in seconds, their wreckage spinning into darkness. Every alien voice on the comm channels now carried fear. Even the proudest commanders could no longer hide it. They spoke in broken orders, their words cracked, their confidence gone. Veyron saw his crew trembling, their hands unsteady and their voices unsure. He spoke loud enough for all to hear, telling them, "This is not chaos, this is strategy. The humans are teaching us. With every strike, they're showing us that patience and precision win wars." He told them, "Remember this moment, for it will live longer than any of us, yet even as he spoke, he wondered if they would live to see the next sunrise. In the council chamber, panic finally replaced arrogance. The elders who once laughed at human history now screamed for solutions, their voices desperate, as they demanded retreat, demanded defense, demanded anything to stop the storm. But it was too late. Their fleets were already breaking their pride, already shattered their power, slipping like sand. Across the galaxy, whispers grew louder. Colonies once loyal to the council now asked if they had followed the wrong masters, for they saw with their own eyes that humans were not myths, they were real, and they were stronger than anyone had believed before. The Shakar itself soon came under direct assault. Human ships appeared from the dark, striking with precision weapons that pierced its shields. Alarms screamed, fires burned through corridors. Crew members cried out in fear. Varen stood firm, shouting orders to hold the line, to fight as long as they could, for he knew the humans were testing them, measuring their resolve as much as their strength. Through the smoke and fire, Varen remembered the recordings he had once dismissed. He remembered the human wars, the endless battles, the unbroken will, and now he understood why they had survived when so many others would have fallen. They did not fight for conquest, they fought because survival had forged them into predators who never stopped, who never bowed, who never surrendered. The humans pressed harder, every alien fleet now scattered, breaking apart, trying to flee, but the hunters gave no rest. Every retreat turned into a trap, every escape blocked by silent ships that appeared in the path before vanishing again. The void itself felt alive with their presence, and the fear reached its peak. On Earth, the leaders spoke one final time. That night, one leader said, "They thought we were stories." Another said, "They thought we were legends." A third said, "Now they see we are reality." And with that, their silence returned, for they knew no more words were needed. The storm itself was speaking. As the Shakar burned, Varen stood on the bridge, surrounded by smoke and sparks, his crew shouting their last orders, his eyes fixed on the dark outside, where human ships moved like shadows with fangs. He felt both fear and respect for them, and he whispered to himself, "They are not myths, they are the truth, they are the storm." And beyond him, across the fleet, across the galaxy, every soul who watched knew that history was not exaggerated. It was not a tale. It was not a myth. The terrifying reality of human history had come alive once more, and it was reshaping the future of the stars. The storm was no longer coming. The storm was here, and no one could stop it. The galaxy was burning with questions and fear as human ships prowled the dark void like ancient predators who had never forgotten how to hunt. The fleets of the alien council now scattered and broken their proud formations, shattered their pride, buried under the shadow of a species they had once mocked. On the Shakar, smoke filled the command bridge, and Commander Varen stood firm, though his body shook with exhaustion, and fire licked at the walls around him. His crew, barely holding together, their voices strained and trembling, yet still he shouted for them to keep fighting, for he knew history was being written in these moments, and he would not allow his ship to die in silence. Across the stars, transmissions carried the battle to every colony, every world, every watching. They saw mighty fleets crumble before the humans who struck with precision and silence. No words, no warnings, only fire and shadows. The broadcast became whispers across every race and every tongue, words spoken in awe and terror, that the humans were real and they were far worse than the legends. The council chambers had fallen into chaos. Elders who once laughed at human stories now wept in despair. They argued and shouted, their voices broken with fear. Some demanded surrender, some demanded exile, others whispered in disbelief that any species could hold such power of violence within them. Yet all of them knew the truth, that they had awoken something they could never control. On Earth, the leaders stood in their silent chamber, their faces carved in stone, their eyes cold with memory and resolve. They had released only a fragment of their fury, only a taste of the storms they once unleashed upon themselves in their ancient wars. And already the galaxy trembled. The humans did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply watched in silence, their eyes telling the universe that they did not need words. Their history had spoken for them. Varen gripped the edge of the console as another blast shook the Shakar, flames tearing through the lower decks. His crew cried out in fear, yet still obeyed his voice. He ordered them to send out one final transmission, not of victory, not of surrender, but of truth. He told them, "Let the galaxy know what we have seen here. Let them know humanity is not myth, humanity is not story, humanity is storm. The message was sent, and it spread faster than the fire around them. Millions heard it, billions felt it, and with those words the truth became unshakable across the stars that the terrifying reality of human history was alive again, and it was no longer bound to one world. Human ships closed encircling the remaining alien fleets like wolves around prey. They did not rush, they did not lose control, they hunted with patience and with purpose, showing that every lesson carved in blood through their history had been carried into the void. Commanders of alien ships begged for orders, begged for mercy, but no answers came, for their council had already fallen silent. The galaxy itself seemed to bend under the weight of revelation. Colonies that once swore loyalty to the council now whispered of humanity as something greater than rulers, as something closer to storms of nature that could not be defied. They were not conquerors, they were inevitability. On the Shakar, flames finally consumed the core, alarms blared with final screams, and the crew looked to their commander in despair. Varen stood tall, his voice calm, though his heart trembled. He told them, "You have seen what I've seen, you know what I know. Remember this, if we survive, or if we fall, humanity is not a shadow, humanity is the truth, and no council, no empire could deny it now." The Shakar fell silent as fire swallowed its heart, yet its final message still traveled across the stars. The humans did not speak of it, they did not boast, they continued their silent hunt, pressing deeper into the dark, as though the destruction of fleets was nothing but another page in their endless story. Earth remained quiet, its leaders waiting, watching, calculating. Their silence, louder than any declaration. Every colony, every fleet, every council felt that silence and feared it more than fire, for they understood that humans did not need to prove themselves. They had already done so simply by surviving their own history. And so the galaxy began to change. Entire civilizations questioning their place in the new order, whispers spreading that perhaps it was safer to stand beside humanity than against them. For who could face a predator that had turned its own world into a crucible and survived? Who could hope to outlast a storm that had burned across centuries without ever dying? On the edge of the void, where the last embers of battle glowed, Commander Varen still clung to life aboard the wreck of the Shakar, his body broken, his voice faint, yet his eyes still burning with the truth he had witnessed through smoke and blood. He whispered to himself, "They thought humans were legend. They thought humans were myth. But now we all know they are reality, and reality cannot be denied." His final words carried on the failing comms, drifting into the void to be picked up by ships far beyond, and soon repeated across the galaxy. Like a warning, like a prophecy, the terrifying reality of human history has returned, and nothing will ever be the same. The humans vanished, once more slipping back into silence, leaving only wreckage and whispers behind them, as if to remind the galaxy that storms do not linger. They strike, they reshape, they leave the world different than it was before, and the stars themselves seem to burn brighter with the weight of that truth. Every species, every council, every soldier now carried the same memory, the same scar, the sight of human ships moving through the dark like hunters, the memory of fire consuming fleets, the echo of silence heavier than any war cry. And they knew in their bones that no story, no myth, no archive had ever been exaggerated, for the truth of humanity was more terrifying than anyone had dared to believe. And as the galaxy turned restless and afraid, Earth stood calm and silent, watching from its cradle of storms, knowing that its people had done what they always did. They had survived, they had endured, and now they had shown the stars that the storm was real. The terrifying reality of human history was no longer hidden, no longer doubted, no longer denied. It had awakened, it had spread, it had taken root in the minds of billions, and it would never sleep again. The storm had come, and the galaxy would never forget.